Yeah, first of all, I really want to welcome you to the NSC conference. I'm not the first one, I know. And I want to say I'm just proud to stand here. It's my first time to be speaker here at the NDC in Oslo, and I really like to be here. I saw the quality of all the speakers and the talks that have happened so far, and I'm quite impressed. And I feel a little bit small, not in size, so it's just a mentality here. But I hope I do it well, I think. So with that, I also want to welcome you to my session here that is called Ringbased Gated Releases, and I extended the title a little bit more to stretch your patience to reliable and automated deployments with GitHub Actions. That is the important fact here. I could have done with Azure DevOps or such kind of things, but it's important to have GitHub Actions here. And because of the fact that we are sharing here around about an hour together, I also should introduce a little bit myself to give you a little bit also from my side. And it happened. Who is entertaining you the rest of the hour? And you see, I have the first issue. Nothing has happened here. We will do it like this. So, yeah, my name is Thomas. I'm working at Xpirit Germany as a CTO/COO, and my role there is to push technology offers and the portfolio into the company, also to push, let's say, my guys to be in authority. Means that they also help them going to stage, public speaking, drive their topics, and make the best out of what they can to be an authority there. I like really working there because of the knowledge exchange, but I also like knowledge exchange in the community. So it means that I often sharing my knowledge and I really gain others' knowledge and want to really exchange experiences and stuff like that in the communities. Therefore, I founded one of the communities in Germany that is called Azure Meetup. That's in the south of Germany at the Meetup Constance. So it's pretty close to the border to Switzerland, and that is where I'm changing things. I also drive Azure Meetup in Stuttgart, that I often call Bandstown, guess why? Where I'm hosting this together with Benjamin Abt and Mike Kaufman. And with Mike Kaufman together, I'm also hosting the GitHub Meetup that is a kind of forum, an online forum worldwide, where everyone can just join and exchange, let's say, experiences with GitHub and DevOps at all. This is what I'm doing in the community. I really like to be in the community. Therefore, I'm also awarded by Microsoft in 2017 as a Microsoft MVP. MVP is the most valuable professional. I'm one out of 3,335 now worldwide. And my, say, focus areas are Azure and also AI and IoT. But I also know those technologies before they became hype. So that is, I think, a fact that I always have to add because I'm not a hype-driven person. I like to be in development and also in technologies. So I'm also spending a lot of time with technologies. And besides this, I'm also spending a lot of time with, let's say, balancing my life. So I'm doing karate since for 3 decades, around about that. And I'm also often be met in woods and open landscape with my camera, shooting, let's say, nice moments. And I'm also making them a little bit beautiful afterwards with Photoshop. I think I stole a lot of time to introduce myself. And therefore, I quickly want to go to the next slide. That's the wrong one. OK, forget it. We do it like that. Before I go to direct to the topic that I want to present you, I also want to introduce you, let's say, a slightly different topic. It's important to speak about. It's a quite underrated thing, but it's really, let's say, good to know about the fact. It's about expectation. And it's not about expectation now that you have maybe towards me now in presenting things, or my presenter here. It's more in a general manner. So I think, from my opinion, expectation is really important to talk about. Why is it? And you see in a bit why I'm looping around. An expectation is a thing that frames something. If you think about expectation, where it can happen, then you see expectations are all around the world. So that's a clear fact. And you often find expectation, let's say, primarily in your private relationship or in your work and so forth. And you see often you are behaving after expectations. So this, let's say, is the most important fact here. If you see an expectation as a kind of driver, then you see also expectation are motivating individuals often to strive for excellence and pushing themselves, let's say, beyond limits and high quality work. And this is something that is really important. So if we talk about expectation, we can also talk about setting standards. So if we have a clear expectation, then we can also define, let's say, a good outcome. And that is what we can lead to our work. So we are, I would say mostly in an IT business. So it means that we have to respect quality in work, especially when it comes to, let's say, creating application and shipping them to other users that have to use our application. So if we have the right expectation to what we are doing, then we can also conclude that we have a right outcome. And that is really the important fact here. Let's say expectation drives us always to, let's say, a level where we can, where we see a high output. A high expectation leads to high output, and we can expect to have a good outcome. Means that we at the end deliver software in a high quality. If we set the bar pretty low, guess what? Shit in, shit out, right? And if you as a developer, for example, producing software where you don't expect any outcome from what you are doing, then you cannot expect to have good quality in software, right? And if you deploy software and you are responsible for maintaining software in your infrastructure, and you don't have any expectation in regard to your quality in maintaining things, then as usual, guess what? So that is what I want to say, and why I want to loop now to the topic is that we always keep in mind that we have to set the bar to the right level. So when it comes to quality, we always have to aim for excellence, aim for good stuff. And that brings us to the next thing. Oh, damn it. This is a video, just look to that. So, be not that guy. What I want to, let's say, state is that you always have to care about your expectation to your quality. If you see, if you remember the first example, that was the diver, she struggled a little bit with oxygen. Reason could be many, but maybe it's also about the expectation to herself in regard to check her equipment. So maybe she was not careful enough. The second example were the bunch of doctors that are trying to help a patient. They failed, so from the video. Why? Maybe they are too routine in their work, their daily work, and they became a little bit reluctant and having attention to what they are doing. So the bar on their expectation to their quality that they brought maybe was quite low, and that led unnecessarily maybe to death. And our third example was that electrician that was, let's say, too experienced in his work life to care for safety. So that's also an example where someone was not really good in setting the right level of expectation to his work. And therefore, he died. That just example to the max. We don't want to die when we are handling IT, so that's all to expectation. But I really want to state, if you have the right expectation to what you want to deliver, then you are keeping always to the max. And that is what we want to achieve. And when it comes to CI/CD, for example, then we always rethink the story that we are doing. So to make it better, even better, as far as we can. And that is always tied to our expectation to what we want to bring and what we want to deliver. So, hope this works again. Nope. So, in that case, by hand. So, talking about pipelines. So this is a pipeline, and I has to add, I'm a consultant, so I'm watching into companies and see what's there around, and I often see something that is really weird. And this is something that I also often saw in the past. And this is a pipeline. They call it often pipeline. I don't know what your experience with pipeline is, but from my perspective, this is not a pipeline, right? Because it's quite too simple. And therefore, this is something that I really want to use for introduction in regard what is a pipeline. But that is not something that you want to care, and especially not because of the topic of ring-based. And this is a YAML file. Hands up who knows YAML. So, okay, jumping over that. But I really want to show you the pipeline is not the case anymore. So we're building things, we're deploying things, that's not what we want to achieve. So therefore, and you remind, expectation, quality, high level, we want to adjust something. We want to make it better. So we're introducing here a little bit that is called an environment. So why we are using environments, what is an environment? Pretty easy to explain. So you have your stages where you want to deploy something, where you want to do something with it, like observing, like testing, like whatever. So you need something that is encapsulating your bits that you want to deploy. So to make your pipeline better, it's quite easy, introduce environments. But that really doesn't help because of that is just pushing through. Yeah? So the bits you are creating is just pushed through the pipeline and ends up in the productive environment. And yeah, we are failing maybe if you introduce an error and a bug or something like this. And therefore, we have also to adjust something. This is YAML pipeline here. So you see we put something like jobs and then we are routing them through. I really want to use this thing here. Let's see if it, this works. So we have our jobs here. It's unnecessary. We have our jobs here that are just piping through the bits, and you see there's just an environment here, and it's just sequentially happening, so we don't have any checks. And with that knowledge, we also can try to improve our pipeline a little bit more. We know, okay, this is a pipeline, we have some environments, and we have to do something more. Guess what? We introducing here some kind of controlling instance. And that what you can see here is manual approval. So this is, let's say, an improvement to our pipeline. We started with a bit, we extended a little bit, and we now introduce kind of manual approval. Why is it important to have a manual approval? You saw compared to the pipeline that we had before, we need something that stops in between. So if we deploy bits to our, let's say, testing environment, and we want to stop it before continuing, we want to control what happened there. So we also want to control by using our checklist, for example, or if we have test plans or test cases, and we want to have someone that just checks up if everything is in a good state, and then can decide to move it further or just reject it. So this is really important to have it. And in most companies that are of, let's say, enterprise scale, this happens all the day. So you have someone that is just checking up if everything is in a good state, in a good mood, in a good health, and then decides go further, just approve or reject everything and start again. This is a really common scenario, and it's often seen in any kind of companies, mostly in enterprise scale, but I think that is not enough. So that is also returning back to the expectation on high quality. We are not satisfied with this scenario, right? Because of some facts. But before, just look into the technical details, how we achieve that kind of, let's say, technical check. You see there's also spinning up the camera. You will guess why. I will show something. And the thing that I also tried now to improve that pipeline is to bring here an environment. And that is something that we saw before, but to that environment, if you know GitHub Actions, then you can also put a reviewer behind that. So the reviewer is now our manual approver, and the reviewer is then asked to give his decision on having something approved or rejected. So that's pretty easy. So you can see with an environment, you can, let's say, control and direct things into that way that you like to have it. Yeah, but there are some, let's say, things that we also have to take into account. First, we have pros and cons. So the pros are pretty clear, I think. So on the one hand, you have someone that can control things, that has to check up things, that is responsible for shipping your bits into the next stage. That's really important. And yeah, you can hold on and you can wait and do whatever you want, and you can be safe that someone cares for shipping it to an important environment, like the production environment. But we have a downside. The downside on this is also that by nature, a manual approver is often a human being, and a human being can make mistakes. So often a scenario is that your manual approver is a kind of a rush and don't want to be bothered by, let's say, doing checkups, going through test plans and test cases. So he decides often to just push it through because he relies on the fact that the developers are doing a good job. So on that side, we are pretty safe. Developers are often do a good job, but yeah, the manual approver here, or responsible is just failing. And those kinds of things are introducing risks. So what we want to optimize now is getting rid of a human being because of reasons. Yeah, I already said. And to make it a little bit more, let's say, clear, what I want to state is, I also want to introduce Dust Deployer. So maybe you know Martin Woodward. So it's a really famous guy doing GitHub stuff. So I met him a couple of weeks ago, and he also created kind of Dust Deployer. So it's a machine that you can use for working with Azure. So to automate pipelines like this. And yeah, I thought, okay, it's for Azure, Azure DevOps. It's for Azure DevOps. And yeah, I thought maybe I can make this happen for GitHub. Because I'm quite curious about GitHub Actions is working in the way that I want to have pipelines running. And therefore, I plan to build my own Dust deployer for GitHub Actions. Compared to the picture before, it's not that fancy, but it does the job. It can start pipelines. It can approve things and reject things. It can also display states. That is also quite important. Not for the pipeline at all, but just for you or me. And it can switch its modes, and it also can simulate resource issues. We come to that in a bit. And it's also an important fact. So now, how it looks like is that thing here. Let's see if it's now working. It's quite important. Yeah. Good. So you see on the left-hand side, there's my browser. That is a repository that I'm using for my pipelining stuff. And you see on the right-hand side, there's Dust Deployer. Don't care for the wording. Dust Deployer, Dust is German, and Deployer is English. So it's famous in English-speaking countries to do that. What I can do now is start my deployment if I press the white button here. And we should see on the left-hand side, if everything is going the right way, that our pipeline starts. You can see it here. Maybe I have my pointer. When we click on it, you can see how it looks like. So we have a pipeline that runs, build, goes into test, stage, and production. So we are waiting now a little bit until that bits are deployed to our testing environment, and we expect now kind of approval. Make it a little bit bigger. And you see here we have our approve waiting, sitting around for a manual approver. And because of the fact that I want to drive it a little bit more to the technical side, I'm using a technical approver. Yeah, it's that easy. I can now approve something, and I expect that my pipeline is running to the next stage, and it's waiting there. So it's pretty easy. So we now got rid from a human being and have a technical gate that does the job, right? Maybe. I don't think so. And okay, it tricked me. It should wait. But maybe I forgot to implement the environment here. I can easily cancel the whole stuff with the red button, but I really don't want to show you buttons. It's more about the fact that I can hold on and I can have a technical approver here. So that is not the best option that we have. Remind to the explanation about expectation to quality. This is not the quality I want to deliver. So in that case, it's funny to have a technical gate here, but it's not the end of the story, right? By the way, speaking of gates, no, oh, it's just slow. I want to introduce gates. That is something that we really want to use when it comes to making our, let's say, pipelines being improved, more improved than usual. Talking about gates means also that we talk about a technical solution. So yes, we have on the one hand a human being that could be our gate, but that is what we want to get rid from. So let's talk about the technical side. You can see on that slide we have some kind of, let's say, technical applications. So what we want to achieve is that we have our bits staying in one state. Our gate is looking for some technical facts, yeah, let's call it like this, and then decides on this, those facts to approve the whole stuff or just to reject. So this is the idea behind that, so we can care with technical gates about the transition from one stage into another, and we can also, let's say, see the whole story as a contract, and that is what we want to achieve. A human being is not defined as a contract because he can differ from what we said. So okay, if I say do this, the other can say I don't want to do. But the technical resources just says, okay, I do. So that is defined, and that is what we want to achieve. We want to have a clear expectation of the outcome. And this is really important. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about those technical gates. What you can see here, we have 3 different options on how to use gates. The above one is that is commonly used. So we have deployment into a stage, and that stage is successful. Now it tries to deploy into another stage, but we have to wait for the checkup. That is what I also introduced with a human being, so with a manual approver. Common scenario that you find often, but there's also a second one. So the second one you can see is that with the timer in the next stage. So after deployment into the next stage, a timer is just waiting, sitting there and counting numbers. And while that is done, I have the possibility to interact with my deployment. I can now say, okay, just get rid of the deployment because I want to reject, or just approve, and I say, okay, this stage is clear, and you can prepare for the next one. So this is a scenario there I want to, let's say, go to. And to be complete, I just want to introduce also the third option. The third option is something that is really special. It's not that often used, but for the sake of completeness, it's deployment to a stage. When this is successful, I deploy to the next stage, and afterwards, I can do all my check-ups about this, let's say, healthy state of the deployment, and then I can decide to get rid of that by rejecting the whole story or by approving and say, okay, this is a valid stage. Not commonly used. On the right-hand side, you see 3 types of gates. The one we already discussed is our user, or responsible, a manual, and a human being. But the other 2 options are also quite important when it comes to the fact that we want to get rid of the human nature, right? So we have the timer that I already discussed, and I will go deeper a little bit more in the next slides. And we have also technical resources that I really want to introduce into my next slides. So technical resources is a pretty good thing that we should definitely talk about. Technical resources are seen like CPU, network, memory, and whatever you can grab as metrics from your system, right? And there's a lot of things. But if you have some kind of scenario where you don't have access to your technical resources, you can also make rich usage of, let's say, notification alerts and whatever. That's also important. And you can analyze all those technical, let's say, metrics and alerts to your needs. Oh, that's also an important fact. So I'm setting now the stage. And with that said, I really want to introduce the ring-based approach. Sometimes you hear the wording like canary deployments is nearly the same. So what I want to say is bring your pipelines into a state where you can sleep better. So let's keep this in mind. Before, I really want to show you what is the scenario, why you have to use or why you should consider using ring-based deployment as an approach. See this. you have kind of company on the left-hand side that is producing an application. So a bunch of IT professionals trying to, let's say, bring their application into the user space. And on the left-hand side, there's a bunch of users that want to consume your application. So what you often have in, let's say, a traditional approach is that you are having kind of artificial scenario. So you have your stages where you deploy your software into, you have your test plans, your test cases, and often it's kind of things that you are thinking of and producing and you're just stating like it could be in real space, but it's often not. So this artificial, let's say, scenario here is something what just sets the level of expectation to quality quite low. You want to gain more. So often it's the fact that the user uses your application in a way that you are not expecting it. So why not asking the user? Why not letting the user decide for you if the state of your current application is in the right and healthy state? So therefore, you should rethink your pipelining stuff and how you work with users at all. So therefore, I introduce here to work with a productive environment directly. And that is what is a ring-based approach. So I can easily ship my code into a productive environment where I have everything in that state that I want to have it, so like expected. So I don't have to copy my environment completely into my internals. So it's maybe that's something that you often have. So that you have a testing scenario that, or a testing environment that is kind of copy of a productive environment. So you have doubled resources, maybe a third time because of another test stage or whatever. And so you have a lot of resource consumption and of a lot of, let's say, drifts to reality because you are changing often testing scenarios and so forth. So that's, I would say, an approach that I really don't want to go anymore because you can easily work in production and productive environments without disturbing, without destroying things. It's quite easy. We will see. So what is the benefit of going directly into a productive environment? You gain directly feedback from the users. So if you're in a productive environment, you ship your application, users will use it. And those kind of users are just complaining, right? You're also, let's say, me included, user of software that really wants to complain instead of say, oh, that's quite good. That's, let's say, in the nature of human being. And we want to use that fact that everyone wants to complain because we want to get better in doing our software. So that is always the state, yeah. We want to achieve more out of things. We want to be better. We want to optimize. And this is also, let's say, a DevOps mindset. That picture shows pretty well how ring-based approach works. So you see rings. Okay, and we have an inner ring, we have a middle ring and an outer ring, and that is pretty easy to understand, I think. So the inner ring is called the canaries ring. So why is it? You see in the picture there's a bunch of people that is being the target audience for the inner ring, for the canary ring, and that are often type of users that are eager and highly motivated to interact with you and the latest bits. So don't know why, but they're quite interested to grab the earliest bits that you can ship to work with that. Often it's kind of state that is not that stable, I would say. So, but they are eager and motivated and give you all the time feedback. So with that feedback, you are consuming a lot of information. You can try now your best to make the application as stable as possible, as fancy as possible, as usable as possible, as whatever you want it to be. And therefore, you are working intensively with that canary ring. And somewhere you are satisfied with everything that you grab from the user space that are really residing in a productive environment. And then you decide somewhere to deploy into the next ring. That is then the early adopter ring. You can see the early adopters kind of being better tester, better user. So they are not that highly motivated with working with bits that are that unstable. Maybe you know the Windows Insider program that is kind of that, where you expect bits where you can work in a daily base, but not, with the expectation that it runs completely fluently through and then you can work with that. So the early adopters are kind of satisfied people that want also to give feedback as early as possible, but not in a frequent cadence. You're doing the whole stuff that you did before with the canaries ring, but then you have different metrics. I will come in a bit to that. And somewhere you have also to decide to ship it to the productive environment that includes the whole user base of your application. And then it's just GA, generally available. How do you decide to go to the next ring? There's a lot of things that you can respect, like having your own metrics. So if you're working like this, then you're also working with the DevOps mindset, generally. Means also that you have your metrics, how you, let's say, analyze the state of your, let's say, journey, the state of your developers, of the software, whatever. So on the left-hand side, I have a box where you put some metrics that you can count and analyze. For example, the mean time to repair, or could also be mean time to react, or something like lead time to react, lead time to repair, whatever you want to use as of a DevOps approach. But it's also important to, let's say, analyze the frequency of receiving bugs, or reported bugs, or reported voice of user, or something like this. So if you take into account all those kind of metrics, then somewhere you have to decide, I go to the next ring. So the next ring is then always based on the facts that you also collected in the previous one. So that's a theoretical part. Now it comes to a little bit more technical side. So that thing shows now the GitHub pipeline that you can have if you're working with GitHub Actions. And you see it looked like being similar to that what we had before. So it's just a pipeline with multiple environments, and somehow we have an approval in between. So the idea here is to introduce to the environment also kind of a thing that is available in GitHub Actions that is called a timer. So you can see here in the YAML file, I also have an environment that's called ring1, for example, and that ring1 is built up on environment definition. You can see on the left-hand side, I set a timer. So that timer is responsible for counting the time downwards from 0. I put here 1 minute, downwards to 0, and I think for demo purposes 1 minute is okay, but for the ring-based approach you would definitely put another timer. So usually you will find a timer of a scope of months, so you leave often a bit in the, let's say, canary state for months until it just goes to the next ring, and that's, yeah, I would say a general approach, not minutes. So if you have set up your environment, you can easily go into your, let's say, deployment and just lean backwards and wait until things happening. So the idea behind ring-based approach is now that you can sleep better, as I mentioned before. Why is it? We are using the fact that we have timers, for instance. So if we just start a deployment, we are just waiting. We are waiting. If nothing happens, we can be sure that everything is shipping the bits that we built before from stage to stage. So if the timer is timing off, then we have our bits in the next stage. That is really important fact. And with that, we can sleep because we know nothing happened, safe to go into production. In case something happens, we immediately stop the whole pipeline. So that is, on the other hand, it's a quite good approach because you can also continue sleeping. You don't have to do anything because the pipeline stops. Means that you have a better life balance now. That is one of the benefits of having ring-based approaches. And how we do this, I will come to that in a bit. But before, there maybe is a question in the room that is how we do this stuff in a productive environment. Because I have 100% user there in a productive environment, I ship the early bits into the productive environment. So there are some rules, I would say, that you have to take into account. First, you have to define that group that is eager to be the canaries group. By the way, do you know why it is called canaries? Someone are nodding. Someone. You want to answer? Yeah, so they're kind of indication if something will happen in future, and they are just dying. We hope that our, let's say, eager canaries are not willing to die because they're using our bits, but that's the idea behind that. So that's also a fact, so just a funny fact. Yeah, first thing is define your group of, let's say, canaries or beta tester, early adopters. And then you have to decide if you are producing features in your application, which feature is assigned to which group. And now I introduced the wording feature. So that term has also to be defined maybe. Feature flags. Hands up, who is pretty familiar with feature flags? I would say half. Yeah, feature flags is nothing new really, it's no invention. And you can see a lot of examples how feature flags are working. For instance, I took a picture here from my GitHub repository. If you go on the top left border in your window, you can click onto your icon and you go up downside in the menu, you find there something about feature flags. You can activate the features yourself. That is something, it's like self-service. But if you want to go the approach with Ring-based deployments, then we want to do it a little bit more behind the scenes. So what we are going to do is just preparing a server with all our flags that we can just ask. So we don't ask the user, we're asking our server, and that server is pretty easy to understand. So if you want to write code, it looks like that. So you're asking the server, okay, give me the specified feature flag here. The server answers with like true, false, number, whatever, and you can just evaluate in a condition your feature and switch it on or off for the specified user base. So that is something that you can configure in your feature flag server, for example. So pretty easy. And there's a guy that wrote a little article about feature flags that is really into that. It's Michael Kaufman. I really want to motivate you to go through that article because he describes all the services that are available for you. There are some on-premises versions, but there are some cloud versions. So not to go too deep into feature flags, but it's really important to know that you can, let's say, control your productive environment by introducing features. And that's also something that also supports the DevOps mindset. So it's quite important to understand this. Yeah. Now let's see. It is about the technical realization. How can we get into a ring-based deployment approach with GitHub Actions? So for that, I prepared also that guy here. Let's see, I'm going bad. Actions. So I want to use the deployer to give you a little handy demo on how we can approach the ring-based thing. Therefore, I also, as I mentioned before, have a switch where I can change modes. And this is a really important thing. We want to change, we want to switch into another mindset. So the traditional, let's say, approach is pretty easy to understand. You have something, you deploy something, someone has to say, okay, go to the next step. So I have an active part that pushes our bits into the next stage. And now we are completely moving to the opposite side and we say, okay, just release it. And in case there is something, as I stated before, stop it completely. So that is what does deploy also do. It should change the color here on display so that you get an indication that it realizes it's now in termination mode because it really wants to terminate things. And with that, I can now start my pipeline on the left-hand side. You can see that the workflow starts immediately. There we go. It's like that. If I can make it a little bit bigger. There. Okay, you can see here we are starting the ring-based approach, and we are going into the next ring, the first ring, that is a canaries ring. Maybe you noticed that I added the 20 afterwards. So this is an indication of how I, let's say, sort my user group. So I'm using 20% of my real users as the canaries. And if I'm done with the canary ring, then I'm going to the next stage. That is then 50% of my user base, for example. And you can also use any technical solution for just load balancing your bits into a specified amount of users. So I would say everything is good, so that the whole story is going further. You see there is nothing happened because I don't necessarily have to approve something. But I really want to simulate an issue now. So I have a kind of observer service, and you will see in a bit how this works. That observer service observes for me the technical resources for my deployment. So just listen for CPU usage, for example. So therefore, I introduced a kind of simulation on CPU usage. So if I'm rotating this curve here, you cannot see that. Yeah, it starts moving. There's a kind of, let's say, progress bar that I implemented. And you see the colors changing to red means that I have now high CPU usage and my deployment gets into an unhealthy state. And what happens now is that my pipeline immediately stops deploying things. So in case I would now have a nightly sleep and I would just dream something, I could really safely dream things further because everything stops now. And the next morning I can go ahead and say, okay, I'm just investigate on the bugs and what happened, and I start the whole story again. So that is really important to understand because that makes our life first easier, and second, we have a little bit more control about what happened because of that technical contracting thing. So if we define now our technical resources in the right way, then we can stay safe with the knowledge that everything is in a good, healthy state when nothing happens. So this observing mechanism about my deployment is really important to have it. And all the time you are, let's say, improving your pipelining, improving your work, you improve also those, let's say, technical contract. In that example, for example, I'm just using CPU usage. That's not enough, for sure not. So therefore, I have to care for other facts, like grabbing metrics like network traffic, like outages and such kind of things. So I always extend my list of things that I want to check while doing things, like getting feedback from the user, like observing how my mechanism works. And all the time I have issues, I try to repair it and include it in my, let's say, technical contracts for those gates to make sure that every time I'm going further in time, I be prepared for things that can arrive. So. And the further I go in time, the better I improve my environment, the safer I can stay with my deployments. And that is a really important thing that we all drive for. If it comes to deployment, and I remind correctly, for 20 years ago, everyone was just fearing the Friday's evening. So is the deployment happening? Will everything be in a healthy state over the weekend? So that is nothing that we want to care anymore. So therefore, ring-based deployment is a real good approach, but we have to make it in the right way, like consuming the right facts. Good. So how is it done with GitHub Actions? So this is somehow an important question. And you see on that picture, I tried to build the architecture, how I build it. And on the bottom side, you see that suitcase that is a Dust deployer. And Dust deployer is responsible for starting and just rejecting, approving pipelines and working with that. So I'm making intensive usage of a GitHub API that is also well documented, but there's an issue. I also will come to that in a bit. And what I also do is consuming not that good approach in security, like the personal access token and so forth. And what the important fact on that, let's say, drawing or scribble is that I have to my application that I deployed kind of observer mechanism. So that guy here. So I'm deploying my artifact into my environment, and that guy here is listening for the health state of that deployment and reacts immediately if something happened. And will communicate directly to my GitHub repository if I have access to. And that is one of the challenging parts that I had here. In that case, my machine is slow. So, I said I make intensive use of the API. That are the APIs that I'm using for Dust deployer and that you maybe use if you are building your own, let's say, observer service that wants to communicate with GitHub repository. So for starting, you see there is this patches command, and also on the other hand, I have to introduce something in my YAML workflow. So the trigger is a workflow dispatch command that can access this via the REST API. I also can, let's say, the last example here, approve reject by setting the right body JSON, and I can really work with the whole GitHub action stuff by consuming the REST API. And that makes it a little bit more handy when it comes to that automated deployment thing here. Challenges that you can expect if you go that approach is that you have to deal with a pet token, with the pet thing. So it's a personal access token, means that your service is working in your name, and that is something that you have definitely not to consider to have it. Authentication is also a thing. If you are creating your service that resides on the environment of your deployment, then this is a unique thing, because you have authentication that is quite hard to build and just related to your repository. You have to do all the stuff by hand, and it's then also not that secure. By the way, using the API also brings up a challenge, because often you have to look for if your, let's say, workflows are running and you are watching for waiting runs. So often you have the wait timer and you want to wait for something and you want to check something happens, then you have to gain the list of all waiting runs. The problem with the API now is that GitHub worked a little bit under the hood and it's not working anymore. So grabbing the state as a request parameter for waiting is not working anymore. I hope they are working around it, but yeah, our workaround or my workaround is just to get the whole list of all running workflows and then just filtering out all those waitings. There's also an issue, and GitHub also reported, so that shouldn't be a problem some in the near future. But there's something that GitHub also introduced recently that is called custom protection rules. So what is this? Yeah, in simple words, it's just a new GitHub app, so that you have to create, but that GitHub app has the option to get the URL of the service that you're creating for observing things, and then you can work with this. In my picture here, you can see that you easily can create your custom protection rules after you created your GitHub app, and you can introduce it by checkmarking it in your environment. So then this becomes a part of your deployment pipeline, and you can think of that custom protection rule that you have something that you can define that is looking for resources, that's just a waiting time or whatever. It just waits here and controls the environment. Good. How this works, so how you can create this mechanism by hand is first you create your, let's say, gate service, observer service. You put it somewhere. So that is the approach of that. The next one is that you have your GitHub app created. And yeah, set the right permissions. The important permissions are here for deployment and for actions to make sure that this app is usable in a different repository. Different repository means I have to install my GitHub app into that desired repository, and then afterwards I can really make use of my GitHub application that can communicate with my gate service then. When it comes to communication with the gate service gets the install access token to communicate with your app or via the app to your repository. That is the secure part here instead of using the pet token. And with that established, I can easily manage now my resource or communication to my repository. For example, if the workflow starts, I as a service get the callback URL to the repository. It means that I as a service now can directly communicate with the repository without caring for any other things. It means that I also can do like reject, like proof commands to my repository. That's easy. I didn't implement it that way. I used the approach before, just because it was just announced as a beta now for a couple of days, weeks, something like this. But I tried it. The thing that I didn't achieve was because of the fact that I can only reject or approve. I cannot, work with the wait timer approach. So what you can do is create an app that is doing stuff like analyzing metrics, like analyzing alerts or log files, and send out the reject. And if you want to also have the waiting approach, then you need a second app that is out there in the marketplace to just wait. until it comes down. So both in combination makes the same scenario as I did before with everything by hand. And if you're interested in building it yourself, then those both URL that are leading to GitHub docs are quite interesting. The above one is for how to create that GitHub app, and the other is about the authentication stuff. It's not that complicated, but you should read carefully to create everything yourself. Let's check time. We're in a good state. So what I also have left is kind of walking through code. So that is what I want to do now. No, that's the wrong one. Oh, I see my Visual Studio Code is crashed. Oh, DemoGod is with me today. Maybe I can do it like this. Yep. Oh, I have a second monitor here. Perfect. Oh, we will make it so. So that is a repository where you can get an example on how to create the GitHub ring-based approach here. And you can find a lot of things, especially the service that I created to observe metrics. Everything is built for Azure, so if you want to consume that stuff for AWS or whatever cloud you are using, then you have to put it into that technical target. It's a simple example to talk to GitHub. I'm using here the, let's say, API that I prepared everything here. You can see that. What you always have to inject is the owner of your repository and the repository itself. So that is the kind of hard-coded stuff. You could go easily the longer way by introducing the URL with just placeholder and inject then the repository name and the owner itself by environment setting, whatever. But I did it the, let's say, handy way. That is not the, let's say, high level of expectation to quality, for sure. It's not, but for demo purposing, it's just quite fine. Yeah. That is what I really want to show you, how to create those things. And the most important thing that I want to leave here without bothering you with code is the intention. So my intention of that talk is really simple. Keep the quality bar, the expectation to a quality quite high, and adjust always your pipelines. If you are using ring-based approach, it's quite fine, but it uses a kind of, let's say, experience. So the learning curve is not that hard, and you can do it quite well if you do it. So that's the point. And if you decide to go that way, you can gain a lot more than just have a pipeline where someone is responsible for moving things from the left to the right side. So that's quite important fact. And you should also have known that, let's say, having a human being that controls everything is always kind of a risky factor. Maybe you have your experiences already with that. If not, then yeah, good luck. And you always have to decide, you should decide for technical resources that checks everything, because you have always kind of definition in your hand. You can say, okay, that are the checkups, that is a decision for going further or going backwards. So therefore, I really want to appreciate having one of you then saying, okay, I'm doing the ring-based approach. Maybe this is a question that I can leave here. Is someone already going that way? Hands up. Nope. Okay, maybe this is really a topic for you. I honestly care for always for quality and deployment, because that's the most important thing that we have. So if you also care for, then this is something that you can benefit from. I really want to like you to use it somewhere. If not, then you can easily go the traditional way, but make it good. For the rest of the time, I would say I'm finishing my talk here. I leave the stage now for questions. If there aren't any questions, but you want to really discuss opinions, I'm really eager for exchanging knowledge, exchanging opinions, and let's say mindset. Then I'm staying here. You can easily come in front and ask questions. In any case, just want to say have a nice stay here in the conference and enjoy all the other talks. Thank you.